Okay. So if you click that link and then you click the picture, the presentation will show up. So I will share my screen now. And in the interest of time, because also this presentation is based on another presentation that I already gave to folks at Clue, I think last year. So, to spare folks, I'm just gonna mainly focus on the legislation, like where we are now. So again, my name is Kamilah Moore. I served as the chairperson of the First in the Nation California Reparations Task Force. The task force was created by a legislative statute, a bill, right, called AB 3121. It was championed by Shirley Weber when she was in the state assembly. Now she's California's first African-American Secretary of State, along with grassroots activists working with her to essentially shepherd this through the state assembly and the state senate, which passed both houses, of course, and then was signed into law by Governor Newsom September 30th, 2020. So the bill, once passed, it authorized the task force to hold public hearings to pursue our mission. So we held over 16 public hearings where, again, the first year we studied the different harms, the different atrocities endured by African Americans nationwide, but also in California since statehood. And then the second year, I characterize as the development stage. We, as a 9-member task force, worked together to develop, reparations proposals based on, everything that we studied this year. I'll back up by saying the task force, our official role, we were a legislative advisory body. So our official role was to advise the entire California state legislature on the types of reparation proposals that they should adopt into law for African Americans. So, we heard from over 150 expert and personal witnesses. We heard over 80 hours of testimony, over 30 hours of public comment, over 3,000 emails, and over 300 phone calls. And again, that was over the course of our work of 2 years. We were mandated to work from June 2021 to June 2023. And in terms of work product, we produced a 500-page interim report our first year, so right after that study phase. And then right after the end of our task force, we produced a final report. That's 1,100 pages, right? It reproduces those first 500 pages where we catalog the different harms and atrocities. And then the remaining pages really goes into detail about the proposals that we, recommended to fix those injustices, historical and ongoing. And so, again, what is reparations? The layman's terms definition is, reparations simply means making amends for offense or harm done. As someone who studied reparations from the lens of international law, that's what I studied when I went to law school, for instance. Reparations comes in 5 forms. Under international law. Most Americans, when they think about reparations, they think about cash or compensation, but there's other forms of reparations as well, like restitution. Can think about, accounting for stolen land or stolen intellectual property. Rehabilitation, that could hint at, mental, physical health care, public health. Satisfaction, that gets at more symbolic forms of repair, like a formal apology, the taking down of Confederate monuments or racist relics and renaming it. To already see, particularly after, the racial reckoning that occurred in the country after the untimely death of George Floyd. And then the 5th form of reparations is guarantees of non-repetition, and that gets at more structural and institutional policy change. Again, some domestic and international examples, in the United States, living survivors of Japanese American internment camps received reparations on a federal level, $25,000. Most folks don't know, but the Florida State Legislature provides free college tuition to Black Americans who can show a genealogical connection to a Black victim of the race massacre, the Rosewood Massacre, where thousands of Black folks were killed in a thriving town in Rosewood, Florida. And then in that international examples, I think the preeminent example is the denazification of Germany after World War II and the ongoing commitments to the Holocaust survivors and in some cases their heirs as well. These are just some of, excuse the text that's small, just some examples of some of the public hearings that the task force engaged in. Again, our hearings, we studied slavery, California's role, the federal government's role, and then the remaining hearings, we really focused on post-slavery incidents and events. So therefore, most of our recommendations for reparations are not necessarily about slavery, it's about post-slavery atrocities, or what we call 12 major areas of systemic discrimination, or the lingering badges and incidents of slavery that still impact society today and disproportionately descendants of slaves. And so this is a picture of the signing ceremony when Governor Newsom signed the legislation into law. And this is a picture of the 9-member task force at our first hearing, which was virtual. So in terms of the thesis of the report, essentially the task force, we argue that, after emancipation, the federal government had a duty, which even was, instructed to them by the Supreme Court in certain cases. They had a duty to protect, these newly freed slaves, to help them transition from pure subjugation to freedom. That happened for a moment in time with the creation of the Freedmen's Bureau, the Freedmen's Bank, Freedmen's Schools. However, it only lasted 12 years. That period was the period of Reconstruction, right? After President Lincoln was assassinated, President Johnson came into power, completely dismantled the Freedmen's Bureau. Then you have, for instance, the Compromise of 1876, where radical Republicans compromised with the Democrats, and what the practical implication of that was, in that compromise, the Republicans allowed for federal troops to be withdrawn from the South, effectively ending Reconstruction. And so when those federal troops left the South, their sole purpose was to protect these newly freed slaves. Once they were withdrawn, that's when you really saw the rise of racial terror, the rise of these Black codes, the rise of even the origins of the KKK. And again, you're starting to see now the origins of what became Jim Crow apartheid. So again, going back to the thesis of the report, or my nephew wants to come in, sorry. So in terms of the thesis of the report, he can come in if he wants, Mom. In terms of the thesis of the report, we essentially stated that throughout the rest of American history, instead of abolishing the badges and incidents of slavery, which again, the Supreme Court instructed them to, the federal government to do, the United States federal, state, and local governments, including California, perpetuated and created new incidents of, hold on. Okay, thank you. So however, throughout the rest of American history, instead of abolishing the badges and incidents of slavery, the United States federal, state, and local governments, including California, perpetuated and created new iterations of these badges and incidents. This is from our executive report. The resulting harms have been innumerable and have snowballed over generations. So our final report focuses on these harms, and we essentially say that so thoroughly have the effects of slavery infected every aspect of American society, it's pretty impossible to identify every single badge or incident of slavery, to identify every harm done to African Americans. So in order to address this practical reality, the final report, we just describe a sample of government actions and compounding harms that again have resulted, and we organize that into 12 specific areas of systemic discrimination, the 12 major badges or incidents of slavery. So after slavery, what born out of slavery are those lingering badges and incidents of slavery. that still need to be eradicated through comprehensive public policy. So I'm going to just briefly go through each, but I really want to get to what's happening now. So, in terms of enslavement, we talked about, nationally, the foundation of America's wealth was built on trafficked African peoples and their descendants. We have data that, corroborates the fact that, enslaved African folks, they were more valuable in terms of capital than, all of the nation's early infrastructure combined. Think about the railroads and other instances of the infrastructure of the United States, and that makes sense because and African Americans or trafficked African peoples that actually built the early infrastructure of the United States on top of being considered financial instruments as well that can be mortgaged and leased and financed and things like that. In the state of California, there was slavery as well. We learned from academics like Professor Stacy Smith that there were at least 1,500 enslaved African Americans in California. There were slave colonies in San Bernardino, slavery in LA and Solano County, just throughout the state. Many of these slave owners brought their slaves from the South during the era for mining for gold. The state also had a fugitive slave law as well, which was pretty rare for so-called free states. Not all free states had law. If you're a runaway slave, you could be caught and deported to be re-enslaved in the South or enslaved on campus. That was a thing here. And then after, again, slavery, you have, again, those lingering badges and incidents of slavery. So we talk about racial, all these chapters we talk about history, also known now. In its early history, there were some more KKK events held in California at certain times than in Mississippi or Louisiana, or elected officials. Some of these towns in California's early history were members of the KKK. And the next Republican campaign in California to hinder the political enfranchisement of Black folks and other people of color. So the next slide is housing segregation. That's another badge or incident of slavery. This is in 1952, this picture of two African-American men. Both of their homes were actually bombed. They're currently they were in one of their homes at the time this picture was taken. Notes were left at their homes threatening, the Black families on the street if they didn't move out. And so, after California finally deemed racially restrictive covenants illegal, that's when you really saw this rise and uptick of violence, where folks took it upon their own hands to try to, threaten Black families to leave, desirable neighborhoods. And separate and unequal education. We learned, for instance, California is highly segregated, and it remains the sixth most segregated state in the country for Black students. And we found that, and also in California, schools mostly attended by white and Asian children receive more funding and resources than schools with predominantly Black and Latino children. We also talk about racism in the environment and infrastructure, and how, for instance, Black Californians are more likely to live in overcrowded housing and near hazardous waste. We talk about the pathologizing of the Black family and how Black children are overrepresented in foster youth and overrepresented in school disciplinary proceedings, for instance. In this ninth chapter, ninth badge or incident of slavery, control over creative and cultural intellectual life, we talk about the vibrant artistic communities that once existed throughout this state, created by African Americans, like the Fillmore District in San Francisco, or Central Avenue, which was a prominent jazz hub in LA. Beach resorts created by Black folks in Manhattan Beach, Santa Monica, again, no longer exist, in part due to unjust property takings via racially motivated eminent domain by the state. The next slide is stolen labor and hindered opportunity. This is, for instance, we found that, in the 40s, there were no Black firefighters in San Francisco. And, by 1970, when Black San Franciscans made up 14% of the population, only 4 of the 1,800 uniformed firefighters were Black. So we're really talking about, the hindrances of opportunity of African Americans in this state when it comes to labor and employment, particularly for desirable jobs. We also talk about the unjust legal system. We found in California, like the rest of the country, California stops, shoots, and kills and imprisons more Black Americans in their share of the population. This is where we also contemplate the fact that African Americans actually, contrary to media portrayals, the number one victims of hate crimes in the state of California, and nationally as well. We also talk about mental and physical harm and neglect, where we talk about, for instance, there's a 7-year life expectancy gap between white Californians and Black Californians. And, we say it's not necessarily about diet, right? We link that gap, for instance, to, medical discrimination, and epigenetic trauma even. We enlisted scientists to give expert testimony on the fact that actual descendants of slaves do actually carry epigenetic trauma passed down to them by their enslaved ancestors that, that lead to, for instance, the idea that we're more likely to, have, die from, have comorbidities, but also die from, cancer and heart disease and other things like that. The last Badger incident of slavery we talk about is the wealth gap. We talk about how in 2019, white households own 9 times more assets than Black households. Also, Dr. King mentioned this as well when he talked about the Federal Homestead Act before his assassination, right? Where he said, while America or Congress refused to give the Negro any land, because by and large, African Americans were excluded from the Homestead Act, at the same time, Congress was essentially giving away hundreds of millions of acres of land almost for free, mostly to white families. And so Dr. King went on to say, that meant, in his own words, that America was willing to undergird its newly arriving European peasant class with an economic floor while denying that same opportunity to descendants of slaves. And so today, as many as 46 million of those white families, their living descendants still reap the benefits, wealth benefits. That's a quarter of the population still benefits from that land transfer that, again, by and large, African Americans weren't able to benefit from. So now we're getting to what's happening now, and how folks can get engaged. So again, I just covered what the task force studied throughout that first year of our work, right? All those atrocities, right? And so this is where I'm talking about the end of the development phase, where the task force recommended over 100 policies to the state legislature to implement over time to eradicate, those major areas of systemic discrimination. And each of our policies relates to, again, each of those chapters, right? So we recommended, for instance, the creation of a new state agency to provide direct services and other resources to descendants of slaves. We recommended the creation and establishment of Black wellness centers to, help with, mental and physical harm and neglect. We talked about the unjust legal system. We talk about, in terms of second unequal education, the increasing funding to schools through the local control funding formula to address racial disparities. In terms of housing segregation, right, to account for the state of California's role in perpetuating housing segregation through allowing redlining, through allowing racially restrictive covenants, through under prosecuting these instances of racial terror where people were literally getting bombed out of their houses. Right, we recommended the providing of property tax relief to descendants of slaves living in formerly redlined neighborhoods, and the providing of, for instance, loans and grants to help purchase or pay down homes. So now I'm going to talk to you about what's actually been introduced by the state legislature. So this just kind of gives you an understanding of how each proposal kind of tracks with each of those badges and incidents of slavery the task force identified. So, but this is also, all this legislation is reproduced in these two below. So I'll just start here. So the California Legislative Black Caucus, they introduced 14 bills January 31st of this year based on the task force's 100 policy recommendations. And Senator Bradford introduced about 4 or 5 additional bills. So we're going to go over the CLBC's bills first. ACA 7, introduced by Assemblymember Corey Jackson. When you see ACA, that, I'm sure you all probably know, means a constitutional amendment, which means that any bill that you see says ACA 7 has to pass the Assembly and the State Senate, but then after it passes both chambers, it has to go to the ballot for voters to decide. And that's because it would amend the California Constitution. So ACA 7 would amend the California Constitution to allow the state to fund programs for the purpose of increasing the life expectancy of or improving educational outcomes for or lifting out of poverty specific groups. So this is not a bill that's just for African Americans, but it is in a way, it would repeal Proposition 209, which bans currently, race-based or even, gender-based affirmative action. And so that is why it's a constitutional amendment, because it would, in effect, repeal the state's ban on affirmative action. So that's one of the bills introduced by the CLBC. ACR 135, that's a resolution. And I have great news to say, this bill actually passed the Assembly unanimously. It's the first step, right? It formally recognizes and accepts responsibility for all the harms and atrocities committed by representatives of the state who promoted, facilitated, enforced, and permitted the institution of slavery. And there's also a Senate companion resolution bill as well. Again, this was introduced by Assemblymember Akilah Weber. And just to jump a little bit, AB 3089, introduced by Reginald Jones Sawyer in the Assembly, it issues a formal apology for human rights violations and crimes against humanity on African slaves and their descendants. So the idea from the CLBC's point of view is, they first initially introduced this resolution bill, ACR 135, right, that, is a formal acknowledgement of the harm, but then they're following it up with AB 3089, which would be the official formal apology on behalf of the state. And the idea is those two bills, right, set the foundation for the remaining of the bills to come. And so, moving ahead, some of the other bills include AB 1815, which would prohibit discrimination based on natural and protective hairstyles in competitive sports, extending the Crown Act. You have SB 1050, which would restore property takings during race-based uses of eminent domain to its original owners, or provide another effective remedy where appropriate. And how that's written, actually, it doesn't seem to be that it's limited just to Black folks who got their land taken away, because through the, in our final report, we really cover the history of all of Californians, not just Black Californians. So we talk about how, there were Asian folks that got their land taken too, Latino folks that got their land taken too. And so, I think as how I read the bill, I think this bill is more universal in its scope. In terms of the next bills, criminal justice reform, ACA 8, again, constitutional amendment, because currently our Constitution allows for involuntary servitude or slavery if you are incarcerated. So this bill would amend the Constitution to not allow for that to happen anymore. The other bills introduced by the CLBC include AB 1986, which would eliminate the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation's practice of banning books without oversight and review. So this bill has received a committee hearing. This Assemblymember Isaac Bryan introduced it. In the committee hearing, he said things like, you can read Mein Kampf from Hitler in prisons, but you can't read books about Frida Kahlo or Nelson Mandela, certain books. And so this bill would, really change that practice of banning books outright. And then there's another bill. I think I still need to try to figure out what the number is, but it's called the Mandela Act, introduced by Assemblymember Holden. It would restrict solitary confinement in California prisons, which currently is allowed. You know, this idea of if you're incarcerated, you can be alone in a hole in a small room, dark, you know, upon hours, sometimes days upon months, at a time. Um, you know, that is cruel and unusual punishment. The next bills are AB 1975, which would allow for nutrition interventions to be an official Medi-Cal benefit. SB 1089 would address food injustice by requiring advance notification to community stakeholders prior to the closure of grocery stores at underserved or at-risk communities. And you have AB 2862 would eliminate barriers to licensure for people with criminal records and would expand an existing bill to prioritize African American seeking occupational licenses. So now we're going to go to the bills introduced by Senator Bradford, which are pretty substantive.
Oh,
The first
Kamilah,
bill he introduced this past summer. Oh,
Kamilah, just a quick
time check.
heads up. Yeah, we're at 2 o'clock. So I'm not sure if we have time to go through all of it. I'm
Okay.
curious if you could tell us what some of the next steps are for our community, and like how are we going to get this done? Also, I'm also surprised, like, there's nothing in there. The opponents are going to be ringing the bell saying, hey, white folks, get out your checkbooks, right? I don't see anything
Mm.
in there that requires any checkbooks from anybody. So I'm just curious about that. And then also just if you could tell us a little bit about what the next steps are for
Yes.
us.
So in terms of next steps, you know, most of these bills are they first have to get a committee hearing. And then, like, for instance, SB 1013 and 1007, they would establish property tax relief to descendants of slaves and formerly redlined communities. Or 1007 would provide grants for descendants of slaves to purchase their first home or for mortgage assistance. These bills would first have to be heard in the Housing Committee, the Senate Housing Committee. Then once they pass the Housing Committee, then they will have to go to the Senate floor to pass, and then they have to go to the Assembly floor to pass, then they have to go to Governor Newsom's desk. So all of the bills, you know, have to go through that process um, by August 31st. Some of these bills are going to start having committee hearings by next month. But, you know, can send position letters to these legislators that run these committees, voicing your support for these bills. And to your point, and not only to the legislators in the committees, but to all legislators, because ultimately they're all going to have to weigh in on these bills. That's something that folks can do. And to your point, you know, there is nothing in here that would you know, require individuals to come out of pocket for anything. Even the state, because for instance, SB 1331, yes, that would establish a new fund for reparations, but it's not, you know, a tax. It's just a reallocation of funds from the state's special fund for economic uncertainties and transferring that over um, to a new fund to fund reparations for African Americans. So, and then these next slides, again, people can peruse on their own. I thought was important. Excuse the formatting, I'll probably the economic benefits of reparations for African Americans, not just for African Americans, but for all of California. You know, all of these bills actually promote, you know, long-term economic growth for the state. So they're a net benefit and positive for everyone.
This is amazing. And we know that it feels very compressed. But what we, to our folks who are here, what we want folks to think about with this presentation is that this is not the end. And in fact, Kamilah is very interested in getting in front of congregations, in front of other folks um, throughout Orange County, and can do that online, and has even offered to come in person. and so part of what our network wants to suggest is that can y'all take this seed back to your congregations or to other communities and invite Kamilah to come and speak more in depth. And it will be, that conversation is going to be very different with each group depending on, who you're inviting to the conversation. And y'all can talk about that, ahead of time to make sure that, it's just a different kind of presentation for different kinds of folks. But we recommend that everyone look immediately for what are the opportunities to set up some of these presentations. Clue will look for some more opportunities to do it. And the point also is that this is not the end of it, but we need to get it jumping. And then Kamilah, you're going to be keeping us posted on when we can send in certain letters. Is that right?
Yes.
Or
Yes.
go and sit in on committees. I think we can usually sit in online for the committees, right? If we need to kind of speak up or send a representative.
Yes, absolutely. I'll keep you all updated on that for sure.
Yeah.
There is a way to participate online as well. You don't have to be there in person. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I'm sorry it definitely feels incomplete. There's so much here. I think most of all, I just feel like the desire to like celebrate, because it just seems some of this stuff just seems so basic and makes so much sense. I don't know if we really need to jump into Margari's presentation, but I wonder if maybe there's one person who has like some kind of like last statement that's either a question or a statement of excitement or whatnot before we hand it off.
I was just going to type in something in the chat, so I'll say it, Adam, that I love what you just said, that it's a celebration, right? It's we are hearing truth that has been truth always, but that is now there's hopefully going to be a megaphone created for it. So thank you for that word of celebration. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah, we're so grateful for your work, Kamilah, and we're excited to try and do what we can. We're also excited to try and move our white folks of faith, for whom many of us feel this is a huge responsibility for us to move. And but we will keep you posted, and if you'll keep us posted, and let's find as many opportunities for you to get out here and educate folks as possible.
All right, sounds good. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so now we'll take a deep breath in and a deep breath out. Breathing in racial injustice and transitioning it, converting it into love and racial justice on the exhale. And we're going to hand it over to someone who lives and breathes justice, and one of my favorite people, Margari Hill from Muslim Arc. And we're excited to hear about your incredible work, sister. Are you there, Margari?
Margari, you're muted. Oh, again. Okay. Sorry about that. I had to relocate when I scheduled this day. I was maybe a few weeks ago, I was informed that they were changing my daughter's school schedule. So for Ramadan, so it's an earlier pickup. So I had to relocate. I'm doing this from my car, not too far from her school. So let me know if you can hear me. Give me a thumbs up. Okay,
Yep.
Awesome. I love technology. Sometimes it can be a little bit of the bane of our existence here. I do have a slideshow to, for today's presentation, I was going to go a little bit over about the significance of Muslim Mark's work, but then also like the significance of doing critical anti-Islamophobia. So just a little bit of a taste of the scale and scope of Islamophobia and why it matters today and why we should consider it into our racial justice analysis. So here we go. It's like it's definitely a bismillah, like from the car. Like I was like all ready to go, and then I'm like, I'm in the car and different angles. Okay, so Muslim Anti-Racism Collaborative. I'm one of the co-founders. Here we have Namira Islam. What's very interesting is that when we talk about racial justice, Namira Islam is Bangladeshi American, but she's Asian American. I'm African American. We actually represent not the margins of Muslim Americans, and I'll talk a little bit about that, but actually like the kind of core, as we, one of the as we talk about who Muslim Americans are, who Muslims are globally, and why does it matter? So it's by no mistake that you would have a Bangladeshi American and African American come together and join forces. Um, we are the leading human rights education organization connecting anti-Islamophobia and anti-racism. Our work is very specifically on human rights education. There's a lot of organizations within the Muslim community that do racial justice organizing, that they have the framework, but like our specific work is on education. I just want to make sure like that as I'm doing the screen that it's not getting blocked off by the, like sometimes my, like you're able to see the full screen. Okay.
Yeah, looks great.
Good. Okay, so, our mission is like our individuals to really understand their role at multiple dimensions. So this past February has been our 10th year. It's been, wow, what a whirlwind a time. When we first started, we could have never imagined all that we were facing. So currently like our main, and we have parts of our community like Muhammad Raza could tell you, once you've been like, it's sort of like a gang when you do anti-racism, right? Once you're jumped in, you could never leave, so he's always forever part of the Muslim Ark family. We have a lot of like our current facilitators. We have Nandi Shabazz, who's in Florida, Layla Abdullah-Poulos, who's in New York, and I'm in Southern California. And then we're also building and recruiting. So this is why I'm kind of like giving you a sense of like who we are, and then I'll close out with ways to get involved. And I'll try to keep this short so we can like folks can have some time to expand and breathe. So feel free to do any time checks. So our services are public speaking. So both Layla, myself, and Nandi, we do talks. And we also, numerous of our members and board members, they also can provide talks. We consult with organizations, so we provide resources. We're trying to move beyond the unpaid labor of pick your brain, because we find sometimes that kind of relationship of those partnerships don't actually serve the organizations because they may not follow the recommendations. But the consultancy, helping people with their strategic brainstorming, providing resources, sometimes even helping organizations headhunt for like trying to find diverse voices is something that we do. We do a lot of webinars. So we were always equipped, like during the pandemic, we were already equipped to do this kind of virtual work, like what we have here. And then we do in-person workshops, full day trainings. We have like hundreds of hours of curriculum. And we do like in our workshops, we also do like facilitations for other organizations. Our 3 tracks that we have, this is like, sorry about this. It'll be just a lot. I'm just going to click a lot till I get everything out there out of the way. Oops, now I'll go back. Oh, I got to do it all again. Sorry, y'all. We're going to get back to our core workshops. currently, like, I think our three most popular tracks that we have are critical anti-Islamophobia. And they're usually organized in like two modules, or like two-hour sessions, in a regular 5-part series as an introduction. And so some of the additional modules that we do is on intersectional Islamophobia. For example, we have anti-Black Islamophobia. We do like reformulating how we think about Muslim geographies, solidarity to address Islamophobia. We have our anti-racism competency. And this was developed early on because like our first work was working with the population that's racialized, but also dealing with the kind of interethnic work within our faith community. And so this allowed us to have 10 years of testing out, having conversations amongst predominantly people of color to work on addressing harm, addressing how we internalize racism and how we could dismantle it. But some of the communities, like when we first did, like when we did our work with the race identity series, was in Dearborn, and that was an interfaith multiracial group, and these were all like secular trainings. And so that was like really fun. So that third track, race identity, which allows like kind of storytelling, narrative work, and it kind of allows us to build connections between like our movements. So those are our 3 tracks. We do a lot of partnerships. And so the reason why I'm sharing some of this work, so we hope that you can all get involved some way, because this work is pretty immense. For folks who've been involved with us, they can testify like how hard we work, how, getting those resources is really important. So we don't just work on racial justice issues that affect Muslims, but we help Muslims be aware of indigenous rights issues. So we were working like campaigns like Muslims for Standing Rock, where we did a solidarity action of bringing sacred Zemzem water to the water protectors in Standing Rock. We also raise money, water for Flint, disaster relief. So we collaborate with nonprofits and strategic alliances to amplify impact. But even as they're thinking about their messaging, we help them really deep into the root cause analysis. So even if we're doing mutual aid to address something, we're always trying to find these opportunities to help people understand that these are connected to systemic issues and that we have to continue and do the organizing. So our kind of thing, like we consider ourselves kind of like content funnelers, so that we can bring more people into organizing, into hopefully becoming more cluistas. So a little bit about our work, like there's some, like as far as like the amount of people on the ground, about 250,000 people over this past 10 years. Like our team is full-time staff. We're very small. Our board of directors, advisory board. So we have our advisory council and a steering committee locally. So we're always like looking to build. We have an open door policy, and then consultants, they help us work. But a little bit about our newsletters. So these are kind of like, we really do our campaigns utilizing social media. On the ground, like with our work, for 10 years, we've been all over the States, mainly virtual, because I've not been to Alaska yet, or many other states. So I hope to get there. But we've had people international, also Canada, the UK. We've done over 200 workshops, worked with 500 plus organizations, impacted a lot. So you could kind of see like we have a mix of universities, health services, organizations, organizing groups, Muslim communities, a lot of different, like we work with a lot of different clients. And it's really like, so I'll go into that, like how we're able to do our work is a combination of our foundation funding, which helps us actually build out, like provide the space to build out curriculum, to develop, to train up people, to do the research aspect, donations from individuals, from from the communities, from allies, and then our fees for services and membership. So that's how we're able to support and sustain the work, which is mostly like staff and, you know, my team creating education content and campaigns to raise awareness, with calls to action and ways that people can get involved with our partners to make systemic change. So how am I doing on time? So I have a few more minutes. So in less than 5 minutes, I'm going to show like the significance of why the work that we do matters. It's like when you think about Islamophobia, sometimes people like, you know, within the framework of the war on terror since 9/11, the US has spent $8 trillion. It's resulted in 900,000, almost 1 million deaths globally. People that have been unalived due to military actions. This is very significant. If you think about what do we invest in environmental issues, right? What could we do to improve our world? But instead, we're having this framework of like focusing on wars, $1 million bombs, and instead of providing humanitarian relief, punitive measures, right? So when we're thinking about mass incarceration, in the United States, and we have this like growing abolition movement, that Muslim organizers are looking at the abolition of war. And so we're definitely anti-war at Muslim ARC because just the human cost, there is no just war. So in the work that we have is like, we also really try to highlight historically of understanding. So like in this picture, if anybody's familiar with a little bit of like, maybe like Spanish iconography of Matamoros. You don't really see too many streets named Matamoros in California, but this is an iconography of Matamoros. And if you see like in well, I'm really bad. Like in the corner, you have this isn't, you know, apocryphal. St. James was not alive during this battle, or well, El Cid, like, which actually pushed back the Muslims who were going into Europe around the 7th century. But this image of a Moor, a black Moor. So Muslims historically were considered were considered black, you know, especially when you talk about the Iberian Peninsula. So Turcophilia, which was on one hand, so that's anti-Asian racism. And then you have anti-black racism. So in our work, so just like a kind of quick overview, like when we do tie into understanding like how significant it is that $8 trillion, that kind of the what drives white supremacy, white nationalism, Christian dominionism in this country has 3 prongs: settler colonialism, genocide, slavery, racial capitalism, Orientalism, and militarism. So these are things Andrea Smith talks about this. Martin Luther King talks about these as you know, like racism, capitalism, and militarism as like the 3 evils. So these are things that uphold white supremacy. And we know it's like a many-headed hydra. So, and there's ways that we can understand the logic of it. And unfortunately that Muslims have been affected by all 3. A quarter, like not a quarter, about 10 to 20%, sometimes in some places more, of Africans who were brought into slavery were Muslim. And so that's a very significant, you know, thing that a lot of people kind of don't understand, like the deep history, but also that 1/3, like 25 to 1% to 1/3 of Muslim Americans are African American, like they are descendants of African slaves, but also colonialism and its impact. So it's like we need to really understand that Islamophobia is deeply tied to anti-Black racism. And in fact, it was used to justify the transatlantic slave trade. You know, and so this is the kind of work, so the infographic of this kind of analysis of looking at Islamophobia and racial capitalism, going back from the 1400s, the age of exploration, up until now. We do like long lectures on this, but the short, you know, TLDR, too long don't read, is that Islamophobia did not begin in 9/11, that at its roots, right, when you think about the transatlantic slave trade, even there's like, you could see in the formations of American society, even certain songs that we have had anti-Muslim sentiment, that there was clear discrimination against Muslims, and that was deeply tied to slavery, capitalism, and militarism. Okay, cool. So some of the other work that we've done where we feel we've kind of advanced the work for anti-racism is like we love Tima Okun's work on white supremacy culture. At the same time in nonprofits, at the same time, sometimes it's not easy to map that out and to come up with solutions. And so like in our work, we've worked to like, as in our systemic analysis, where we go through the 4 I's of racism, of ideological racism, internalized racism, interpersonal racism, institutional racism. We've kind of distilled down the 4 ideologies that we feel like foundational to white supremacy. And the first one, white is right, noblesse oblige, scarcity mindset, and social Darwinism. So in our work, whether it's our competency in building solidarity, in all the work that we're doing, if we're able to like uproot how does this show up in how we internalize it, how it shows up in our institutional policies, in our interpersonal behaviors, we can disrupt it. And so we love to map it out and come up with solutions and draw on things. So some of the things that like people may not all understand is like not understand, but just the scale and scope of Islamophobia. Like I think it's becoming clear now. Like we have so many clients now where there's a spike in anti-Islamophobia incidences, but just like how entrenched those are in the laws in the United States. And state by state, there's increasingly restrictions, or even Muslims have a hard time even getting buried. Like there's a resistance against our cemeteries, spaces of living, housing discrimination. Muslims experience disparities on every level, from medical, education, workplace, and it can interplay with how they are racialized, whether they are racialized as Arab, as brown foreign other, as South Asian, as African, and it's different for Somalis and different for West Africans. And so like our work is to kind of like map that out. So it's like, like I listed out some of the institutions, but these are like policies like NCERS, Patriot Act, extreme vetting, things that just Muslims have to kind of go through. And then the kind of ways that they experience the interpersonal, and then our own internalized, like this stuff affects the psychology, like the psychological well-being of young Muslims, and older ones. I get stressed out too, like the levels of depression that we've seen from just the discourses since October 7th. I've never seen this many people so stressed out, like, or Muslim Americans so stressed out as I see now. Not even since 9/11, because I was very involved in 9/11, but the scale and scope of how we're experiencing Islamophobia is pretty is unprecedented. So, like I talked a little bit before, we kind of work on mapping this out and working with our partners and empowering people to counter Islamophobia from framework change, awareness building, behavioral change, and systems change. So that's like, we got a lot of work cut out for ourselves. And we really are excited to do this work in Southern California. I know like I fly all over the place, but I'm really think it's so important to ground this work where we have such a large Muslim American population that's very, very diverse. And in doing our faith-based work of centering those who are most impacted by systemic racism. So the ways like to support Muslim Arcs work or getting involved, it's like, you could book us for your DIA work, like understanding how you can do culturally competent outreach, understand what is Islamophobia. Those are the kind of things that we do. We have like on our website some of our workshop offerings. Our membership is open to everyone. And then later this year, we look forward to launching our organizational membership. And then always we appreciate donations. And we'll send a link. But importantly, on September 21st, we have a racial justice symposium. And then ahead of that, we will be launching a racial justice award. So we'll be asking you all for nominations for people. We really want to highlight the work that you all have been doing. That's really amazing. And so this will be at Emerson College, which is in it's in Los Angeles, so we hope you could come out, you know. I know sometimes we like exist in our little counties and stuff, but but please do save the date because we really want to explore, like celebrate what has come before us, uplift what's happening now, and like celebrate the wins, and then strategize for the future. Like that is the goal of this symposium, is to have a multi-faith space where we have narrative change work, bring organizers. So we really want to have the faith-based organizers there to like educate folks who don't understand it as much. And then DEIA, because we gotta have some talks. We got some talks about what's happening with DEIA, because it's been a lot of unintended consequences, right? You know, it's been kind of tough. So this is Muslim Arc. You know, we create spaces for learning and developing racial justice, connecting people through storytelling and cultivating solutions. And I'm here locally, like I'm like an untapped resource in Southern California. Look at us as a resource and feel free to reach out for any questions. And I look forward to partnering with you all and, you know, and yeah, creating, connecting, and cultivating.
Oh my gosh, amazing. Thank
I got
you.
on time.
Yeah, right on time.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any questions or comments or thoughts for Margari? Felicity says, we'd love to have you present this at their church. Any other thoughts?
So is there a link for membership, or when you talk about membership to Muslim Arc, is that
Yeah, let me see if I could find it. I need to pull up my links here. Oops, let me get out this here.
Maybe at the women's luncheon. I'm just thinking out loud right now.
Yeah, I'm gonna you know, please send us like invites or ways that, because we were building out a team so that, you know, folks can get to know more about our work and do more of the presentations. So I'm gonna send the link here for the join us. Let's see, hopefully it should have a little sign up here. Yeah, here we go. So our website is constantly under construction, but we're still like in the midst of that. So we're like, you know, we see this as a self-investment, and we're really excited to like launch more like groups where we could do that kind of like affinity groups, racial justice groups, and you know, and come together and share our stories. So very oh, thank you, and a kind word. Yay. I appreciate this.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Margari. So I know that folks have to run, and I know that all of this feels very fast and compressed, and we could talk about all of this for hours. Let's think about this, about Margari and Kamilah, as the tips of the nonviolent spears that that are flying through the air right now, and and we need to help propel them into the dark heart of injustice and racism. But so let's brainstorm. Can everybody brainstorm where and when would be great opportunities for Margari and Kamilah to speak about their incredible work in Orange County? Sooner is better, but also later. And if folks can send me your recommendations, Clue would love to use whatever capacity we have to try and connect and set some of these up. I'm thinking that it would be really great to think regionally. So, you know, if maybe the Lutheran Synod could hold something, maybe the Episcopal Diocese could hold something, maybe the Methodist Conference could hold something, you know, so to get as many people in front of it, well, to get Kamilah and Margari in front of as many of these folks as possible, and to maybe develop a more intentional regional faith community strategy. But also I imagine y'all are open to do individual, you know, churches and synagogues and things as well. So, but please do send me your ideas.
Okay. There's a Women's Journey Foundation that actually is presenting this weekend, but I think in the future that might be because it's based on women. And it kind of comes out of it's Patty Terrell, who's Center for Spiritual Living. And she pulls that together every year, but that seems like that would be a good place.
I would love that. Yeah, I mean, all of these, you know, when we think about maternal health, like with Kamilah, like, I mean, it's just so, it's so important for us to understand like how these things intersect and, you know, and just like, yeah, like, I mean, I look, because like we also have like a gender-based like Islamophobia, but I mean, there's organizations that do gender, but what we found was like, because of sometimes like the ways that Islamophobia shows up, is that sometimes the erasure of Black Muslims or Southeast Asian Muslims who, you know, like it's just that happens. And so, you know, and then also like how racism and is, you know, and faith, like faith identity. So it's like, it's so important to see like the diversity of like of like faith identity within women's groups, you know, and racial diversity within our interfaith groups. And so I'm like, yeah, I'm definitely look forward. And Kamilah, I would love for you to connect and educate my community, because like I feel like, you know, like I mean, yeah, like there by 2020, like they were almost like primed to like be more involved in Black Lives Matter, but we're like, now we gotta get reparations, you know, like it was like pulling teeth to get them to say, stop shooting us. So like, and those were fractures, like our community's fractured because sections of our community don't feel like their needs are being attended to. So, you know, your analysis like that would just, I'm gonna bring you on. Yeah.
Okay, we'll definitely connect. Thank you. Yeah. And I think that's indicative. I feel like so many people were prepped in prime in 2020, and it just seems like in 2024 it's kind of we've taken some steps back in society. I feel like, you know, that's intentional in a way too. You know, you have forces for evil, like really being hyper organized to kind of you know, eliminate the little progress that we were able to make post 2020. So we definitely have to stay together, stay united, and you know, push for progress and justice.
All right. Well, to honor folks' time, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Just again, so incredibly grateful for you, Kamilah, and you, Margari, and for the incredible work that y'all are doing. And we're excited to come up with creative ways to try and support and get y'all in front of our community. And we have a lot of leaders here in Orange County that are not going to be on the right side of history unless we really push them. And so this, you know, this is a really important battleground that we need to, that our community really needs to be fighting. So, but with that, is there someone here who might be willing to pray us out back out into the world, into our day?
I will. This is Connie.
Awesome.
Dear Creator of all mankind, we just thank you for this meeting, this education, this information that is so related to all of us. We ask you to guide our footsteps and to help us to lead forward to those that can help make a difference and to challenge those that are against what we believe is fair. We thank you for this opportunity, and we ask you to bless us and anoint our mind, bodies, and souls to serve people with justice and dignity. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Thank you.